Hello, this is the second video in a series on Chapter 9 of Government in America. We're covering the presidential nominating process, and we're going to start by focusing on the timing and the sequence of the primaries and caucuses. Unlike the general election for president, in which all the states vote on the same day, in the nominating process, the process is staggered. Different states vote at different times. Um, the notion behind this is that if you were to have a 50 state primary or a national primary, all where everything's on the same day, then a couple of things would happen. Number one, candidates who aren't as well known would not have a chance to uh, get attention and break out, because it's very hard to get from nobody knowing who you are to the entire country knowing who you are. Whereas if you just have to worry about one or two states getting to know you, then you've got a better chance. And if you do well in the early states, then you can build up momentum to do better in the later states. Also, it would be very expensive to set up an operation so that you have people working in every state at the same time. When you stagger them, you can send people into Pennsylvania when it's time for Pennsylvania's primary, and then when Pennsylvania's primary is over, those people move on and they can go to Indiana or whatever the next state is. Uh, so, plus then you don't have to worry about running ads on national television. You just have to worry about running ads in the states that are about to vote. So there's a lot of factors that make the party say, look, we don't want to do this all at once. We want to stagger them. Now, what that means is there's a lot of pressure there's a lot of pressure on the candidates to do well in the early primaries and caucuses. If you don't do well in the early primaries or caucuses, then people who like you and might vote for you, they might look at you and say, well, wait a minute, I don't think she's got a chance or he's got a chance. So I don't know if I want to waste my money in donating, or waste my time in volunteering, or waste my vote in voting for this person. So the idea is that if people who don't do well in the early states, they start to see their donations go down, which means they can't pay staff, they can't buy ads, their volunteers go down, and so it becomes harder and harder to operate. And so then the people who don't do well in the early states drop out before the later states even have any vote. So they call it a winnowing process. You're narrowing down the number of candidates. Now, because of that, if your primary happens later in the primary season, or your caucus happens later in the season, then you may not have that many people to choose from. It may already be pretty much a done deal. In 2004, by February, early March, pretty much everybody except for John Kerry had dropped out of the Democratic primary. So it was pretty much a done deal if you were in a later state, like Pennsylvania was back in 2004. You could go, you could vote, you could say who you liked, or whatever, but it really didn't make any difference, because everybody knew that John Kerry was going to be the nominee, and he was the only one who had a chance. 2008 for the Democrats was a lot different, because Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton ran in every primary until the end in order to see who could rack up the most delegates. So in that case, the later states did get a little bit more influence. But again, that's unusual, and states don't want to feel like they're irrelevant. They want the presidential candidates to come visit. They want them to spend money in their states campaigning. They want them to curry favor with elected officials in that state to try and get endorsements. So because of this, states would like to go earlier in the process. And in order to try and make that happen, they try and move their primary closer to the beginning. And so that's a process called front loading. Uh, and in the past, front loading has gotten to be pretty extreme because it's a tradition that the state of Iowa holds the first caucus in the country. And it's also tradition that New Hampshire holds the first primary. Now, these are small states with relatively small populations. So the logic was that these states, because they're small, allow the candidates to go and do what's called retail campaigning, where you hold town hall meetings and forums and you knock on doors and you go hang out in diners and you shake hands and you really try and make contact with as many actual voters as possible rather than relying on TV ads or other people to do it for you. And this allows that small group of voters in that state to really scrutinize the candidates and decide who's good and who's not so much, and that lets you winnow the field down. This means that because Iowa and New Hampshire have traditionally gone first, that candidates spend a lot of time visiting Iowa and New Hampshire and working in Iowa and New Hampshire. Okay, they are the most favored states in the presidential nomination process. And the other states get a little bit jealous of this. They want the attention. So they try and move their primary or their caucus earlier. And so in retaliation for that, Iowa and New Hampshire will move theirs earlier. Okay? So in 1976, which was when Jimmy Carter did very well in the Democratic Iowa caucus and got a lot of attention for Iowa. Then Iowa held its caucus on January 26th, and then New Hampshire held its primary a month later on February 24th. So there was a lot of time in between Iowa and New Hampshire for things to move to the next state and for people to pay attention. In 2008, because of all of the front loading, Iowa had their caucus on January 3rd. And New Hampshire had their primary 5 days later on January 8th, so less than a week. Now, that's probably been the most extreme. Since then, the party organizations have stepped in and tried to put a little bit more order into the process by saying that if states move up too early, they'll lose all of their delegates, which means if there's no delegates, then the candidates don't pay any attention, so you don't get the benefit of going earlier. And so that's allowed things to get spaced out a little bit more. So this year, 2016, which is when I'm recording this, the Iowa caucus isn't until the first week of February. So they have been able to kind of reverse this front loading to a certain extent. So we'll see how long that lasts. Okay. So, after Iowa and New Hampshire, at varying times, the other states have their primaries. Also, Washington, D.C. has a primary. Several United States territories hold primaries or caucuses. So they get a chance to vote on the nominee, even if they don't get a chance to vote on the actual president. And you get to the end of this process, and hopefully somebody has won 50% plus one of the delegates, and we go into the convention knowing exactly who the nominee is going to be. Now, one thing that can prevent someone from winning 50% plus one is that the party organizations try to keep a little bit of a thumb on the scale. They appoint some extra delegates to the convention. Usually these are members of the party in government, people who hold elected office. So if you're a Democrat and you're the mayor of Philadelphia, you automatically get to be a delegate. If you're the governor of Pennsylvania and you're a Republican, you automatically get to be a delegate to the Republican convention. These delegates are called superdelegates because they are not committed to vote for whoever got the results in their primary. So if the mayor of Philadelphia doesn't want to vote for the candidate that the primary voters in Pennsylvania liked, that's okay. The mayor gets to do that. So if the race is very close, the superdelegates can tip the scale over who's going to wind up getting over that 50% mark. And again, 2008 and on the Democratic side is a really good example of this. Barack Obama definitely had more delegates than Hillary Clinton did, but he didn't get 50% plus one because there were all these superdelegates. So for a while, Hillary Clinton's campaign was thinking, well, maybe we can get the superdelegates to vote for us anyway, and then we can still get the nomination. But in the end, the superdelegates decided, you know what, we're going to vote for the person who got the most delegates from the primaries and the caucuses. So a lot of superdelegates, including some who had originally said they were going to vote for Hillary Clinton, changed their mind and said they were going to vote for Barack Obama. And so Barack Obama went over the 50% plus one mark and got nominated on the first ballot at the Democratic Convention and went on to win the presidency. But the superdelegates do throw a wrinkle in there that we can't guarantee that they're going to vote in a certain way or vote for the person who got the most votes or the most delegates. So this whole process is complicated. And in order to run, even just in Iowa and New Hampshire, there's a lot of things you need. You need money. You need staff. You need volunteers. You need people in the party who are going to support you. And so you can't just show up a month before the Iowa caucus and think that you're going to do well. The caucus goers in Iowa expect that you're going to show up months ahead of time. So the candidates start raising money and getting endorsements and hiring staff long before there are any votes cast in the primaries or caucuses. This process is called the invisible primary because it has an effect on who wins or who loses, even though nobody's casting any votes. A lot of people start running for president officially, like they officially announce that they're running for president a year or maybe 10 months before the Iowa caucuses, because they want to start raising money and gathering support. And if during all that time you're not able to catch on, you don't get donations, you don't get volunteers, well then people can realize, hey, you know what? I just can't do it. I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna make it even to Iowa. So people drop out before Iowa, before there are any votes. Several people have already dropped out of the Democratic and Republican presidential nomination contests for 2016. So that's why they call it a primary, the invisible primary. It's a contest, and the losers lose, but there aren't any votes, so you can't see who's winning and who's losing. You kind of have to read between the lines to figure it out. Okay, so that's the way that people try and get the support of the delegates in order to be able to win the nomination. We'll start off on the next video with the money and the fundraising process that candidates need to go through in order to have a chance at winning that game. So until then, I'll leave you with these questions for further thought and discussion.